So this diagram right here, I feel like is an overview of how some people, including myself, feel like their life is. It's basically where you think you're doing great, you're hitting your goals, you're tracking your habits, and you're getting to where you want to be. You make one mistake, one small slip up, it could be just something very tiny, and you end up turning that into a huge deal, and you end up going down, and you end up going below where you used to be, your baseline. You end up losing control, and then you end up miserable. And this cycle ends up happening where you're doing great, you do this whole loop, you come back down, you build yourself all the way back up, you're doing great again, and then guess what? You come back down to miserable, and you're doing great, and you're going back down to miserable. I feel like this is a pattern that a lot of us repeat kind of day to day in our lives, in our habits, in our personal goals. So in this video, what I want to cover is really how you can spend most of your time staying up here and ensure that even after a mistake, you don't end up losing control and end up completely miserable and going through this whole rise and fall cycle, right? So how do we remain up here and make sure that our lives are consistent? So if you do enjoy this video, please do leave a like. It does help push this video out to other people. And yeah, let's get right into it. So now I want to talk about two specific types of people. So here on the left-hand side, we have someone who is the over-optimizer. And this is a person that is tracking their habits way too much. They track everything from the time that they go to bed all the way to the time that they wake up and everything that happens in between. And basically, they're constantly stressed that they aren't meeting their targets. They have unrealistic targets that they've set for themselves or whatever. And they're constantly unhappy that they aren't meeting their targets. And they're essentially depressed. And then you have the guy over here. This guy is just the live life guy. So you have the over optimizer on one side, and then you have the just live your life, bro. Like, who cares? And so this is the guy that has no plan for what he wants. He's repeating bad habits constantly, and he's also depressed. So we have on both ends of the spectrum, you have all the way to the left, the extreme of the over optimizer, and then all the way on the right, you have the guy that's just like, just live your life, bro, who cares? And so both of these people are going to experience this exact pattern of existence because they're both at the extreme ends of the spectrum. So I'm pretty sure if you clicked on this video, some portion of you falls into this category right here. And I know I myself personally fall into this. So we're going to talk about how this happens, why over optimizing things is really not optimal for you. And it's actually just holding you back in the long run. And I feel like if there's one quote that sort of sums up the over-optimizer as a whole, is this one here by Dostoevsky, which goes, "You sense that you should be following a different path, a more ambitious one. You felt that you were destined for other things, but you had no idea how to achieve them. And in your misery, you began to hate everything around you." And basically that quote alone just sums up the over-optimizer because essentially this is the guy that is like, thinks he's destined for greatness, thinks he has all these plans. He's trying to get to where he wants to be. In their misery and being fixated on that too much, they began to hate everything around them because they're not reaching the things that they feel that they're destined to reach. All right, so now that you've seen what the bad pattern of existence looks like, what most people's lives look like, let's talk about like what the ideal pattern is and also how you can get there. So here I have just like a blank diagram and I'm going to try my best to draw something and hopefully it goes well. But basically you start off, you're up here, you're doing good, you're hitting your habits, and then you hit a little plateau right here. So at this point you're doing great. You're hitting your goals, you're doing fantastic. And basically what happens is that you make one mistake. You slip up somewhere, you break a habit, you go one weekend without, waking up at your right time, or some sort of thing makes you relapse. And essentially it starts this downward pattern. And it always happens like this. It always happens with one trigger or one thing where you say to yourself, oh, it'll just be this one time. And what happens is that spirals all the way down where you start breaking everything around you and you go below your baseline. So this is like, bare minimum. And you go below this and you end up hurting yourself more until you end up at your low point. So this is when you're at your lowest, you feel the worst, you feel like you betrayed yourself, you've gone against everything that you said you were not going to do. And then it's a freaking climb from here. You got to really work on yourself, get yourself back together, and then you'll climb back up. If this is the original pattern of existence, how do we prevent this, right? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen? And really the key thing that matters is how fast you can get back to baseline or how well you can keep yourself at baseline when things go south. So when things are starting to go south, what is your resiliency like to stay at baseline? So let's go back to here. So now you're doing great. You're at the same spot where you were when you started. And guess what? You slip up and something happens. But instead, this time, instead of letting yourself fall into that trap of just constantly self-sabotaging and breaking everything that you said that you wouldn't break, you need to catch yourself. And this is a trick right here, is to basically catch yourself, to catch the thought pattern that triggers that essential loop, and to catch yourself and essentially bottom out right here so you don't end up going down. And it goes back to the point that I was making earlier. What matters is how resilient you are to keep yourself above baseline. When you break a habit for a day, can you catch those negative thoughts that come up so you don't end up down here, right? So you're going to catch yourself, and then you're going to build back up, and then you're going to experience another dip. And guess what? By this time, you've caught yourself once, you're going to catch yourself again, and essentially keep climbing up. So you're actually progressing in life. You're actually moving forward with your goals, with whatever habits that you want, and you're not constantly falling behind. The key here is to train yourself to catch yourself. I think I would get a 10 out of 10 in art class for my very artistic drawings. But basically what I'm trying to say is that, like, fighting the world, fighting reality to try to get what you want by just forcing yourself to stick to everything perfectly is going to lead to basically this pattern repeating over and over and over in your life. And there's going to be no change. And so the key here is to just stop fighting reality and just focus on what's making that trigger in the first place. And the key to this concept is this idea of what's known as a self-image, which was probably coined by Maxwell Maltz. If you guys have read the book Psycho-Cybernetics. And basically, it's this idea that you have an internal self-image of yourself inside your head, inside your psyche, inside your subconscious. And this self-image basically dictates everything that happens in your life. It's essentially the default that your mind falls into when something uncomfortable happens. And so what happens is that you go there and you say you want to change, you want to improve. What happens is that you start improving, and then something small happens right here. And what happens is you default back to your self-image, which is this dude here. And you end up being unhappy, and you end up defaulting to, oh, I'm that person, right? I'm not the guy that sticks to everything consistently. I'm this person. And so you go back to your self-image, and guess what? That becomes your reality, and you end up at the low point again. And so the key here is to change your self-image. It's to change the concept, the visual that you have inside your head of you. And when you do that, it becomes easier to, guess what? To catch yourself right here. And so Maxwell Maltz has this quote right here. It goes, "The self-image is the key to human personality and human behavior. Change the self-image and you change the personality and the behavior." And so instead of trying to force yourself to try to fix something, you just work on fixing the self-image of yourself. And then when this loop happens, which it always will, like, no one is going to escape this loop. Doesn't matter how productive you are, doesn't matter how disciplined you are, you're gonna have some shit that happens where either your car breaks down, or you have relationship issues, or someone causes trouble in your life. And guess what? You're going to have this pattern where you're going to fall behind on something. And the trick is if your self-image is good enough, is stable enough, you will be able to catch that and build up from there. And literally, when this happens to you, when you decide to go down this route, just take a pen and paper and write down, what are the thoughts in my head? What am I telling myself? You know, like, am I not enough? Or it'll be the last time, or just one more time. Like, what is the negative self-thought pattern that goes inside your head? Catch that and then work on that on your self-image. And I love this quote by Rudolf Steiner that connects really well with this, which goes, "There can be no progress, however, on the path to higher knowledge, unless we guard our thoughts and feelings in the same way as we guard our steps in the physical world." Basically, everyone is really careful about what they do in terms of actions in the physical world. You don't want to say something to upset some person or whatever, but people don't really care about that in the same way when it comes to their thoughts. So then you're probably asking yourself, how do you actually go about changing your self-image? And the answer is very simply, you need to, number one, relax. You need to get yourself in a peaceful state that you can actually work on. Number two, you're going to visualize yourself as what you need to fix and your ideal self. And then you're going to internalize those thoughts. You're going to tell yourself whatever the negative thought pattern that you had, the exact opposite of that. So if you're telling yourself, I'm not enough, you tell yourself, I am worthy of XYZ. And then you repeat that process over and over and over again until you literally change this self-image, right? It's not super complicated. You just need to do this. You need to relax, you need to visualize, you need to internalize, and then you need to repeat. And if you do this over and over again, over a span of like 3 months, well, guess what? This will change. And once that changes, then you will be able to catch yourself and you will be on an upward trajectory. And so I'll leave you guys with this quote right here by Michael A. Singer, which goes, "Eventually you will see that the real cause of the problem is not life itself. It's a commotion in the mind about life that causes the problems." So if you can catch yourself, then you can prevent this pattern of existence from happening, where you're doing great and then you go end up miserable, and you're doing great and you end up miserable. And you make it so that when this stuff happens, you can catch yourself and build upwards from there. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys really enjoyed it and found it valuable. If you did, please do leave a like and share it with someone that you know. It really does help grow this channel. And I will see you guys in the next one.